speaking of relationships of all ways, shapes, and forms, I was out on a very, very hot date last night with a girl from HR, Dwight.
Really? We don't have any girls from HR.
No, that, for the sake of the story. And things were getting hot and heavy.
Yeah.
And I was about to take her bra off when she had me fill out 6 hours worth of paperwork.
Like an AIDS test.
And a one. There it is.
And
okay.
And touch the mic.
And to touch the microphone. Do-ba-do-ba-do, do-do-do. Do-ba-do-ba-do,
Keep it going.
That's
New
the
intro music.
Yeah, that's the theme song for the first ever Guppies. We mentioned before, this is kind of Guppies part 2 because I guess our top 10 album releases of the year sort of counts as part of this as well, because it's all super meaningful, super incredible, super sought after awards. That's what we're doing here.
Yes.
Yeah.
You are welcome, everyone.
There is no bigger award to win than a Guppy. Of course, the Guppies being Growing Up Punk's version of, more specifically the Dundies, I suppose, from The Office than, like the Grammys or the Emmys or something, but it is what it is. Speaking of Growing Up Punk, welcome to Growing Up Punk, the podcast about punk rock and all of its friends. My name is David. My friend is Aaron. Hello, Aaron.
Hey, what's up? Nice to see you.
Oh,
nice to see myself as well.
Yeah, we can see ourselves. It's all good.
Best part of the show.
Best part of the show. Yeah. Best part of the show is just looking at the monitor feed of myself. That's what I do.
Better version of me.
I don't even watch you at any point. When I'm looking at my screen like I am right now, I'm looking at myself. So what
version
we're
of myself that has no mistakes.
That's right. I've filtered them all out. What we're going to do on this episode, the final episode of what has been a crazy, weird year, 2020. We listed our top 10 records last episode. If you haven't heard that, I'd recommend going back and listening to it. If you haven't heard that, I'm curious as to why you're listening to this episode. It's a random one, I guess, to start with. But hey, we listed our top 10 records of the year last episode, so you can go check that out. We had a couple that we both shared on our lists. The rest were all different. I think in total we had like maybe just 3 picks. We had 3 picks, I think, that crossed over. But we won't give any of those away because if you haven't heard it, well, hey. But what we're going to do today is we've got 17 different award categories. Awards, I say, air quotes. For those of you on YouTube, you saw me do the air quotes. But yeah, what we're going to do, we're basically just picking our favorites in 17 different categories. There's not a whole lot of thought put into this. It's really, here's the category, and this is one of the first things that came to mind type thing. Aaron said for one of the categories coming up, he wasn't going to go through 30 different records to actually double check and pick. He just went with what came to his mind first. And that's kind of the idea. That's how we do most of this stuff. Not a lot of research is actually put into many of these episodes.
Isn't that how they normally do awards? It's just kind of like, what was the last movie I saw? Yeah, pick that.
You know what's funny? So I have had the opportunity to vote on a couple different award shows. One of which, back when I was when I graduated high school, I took a year off, but then like 2 years after high school, I went and did a 1-year program that was for production for music and commercial production stuff. So we were working in a studio, and this was in Calgary. And so the guy who owned the studio actually voted on the Grammys. And so one year he was like, I really don't feel like doing this. So he just let a couple of us vote on the Grammys. And at the time, you literally got like a thick book that was sent to you and you went through. And I want to say each award, maybe there's 2 awards on each page, either that or each award was on a page. And so like you're getting into, I mean, when they televise the Grammys, they're only televising certain awards, right? Like they're not televising best polka album of the year. But so we went through and he's like, most of these, I have no idea what they are, which we didn't either. So we just went through and literally voting on some of those things, like best polka album, for instance. It was like, which one was performed by the guy with the funniest name or the album with the funniest title or whatever. That's literally how we were picking some of these. So award shows in general are kind of silly. I suppose maybe like People's Choice Awards are a little different because you actually get listeners and fans and whatever to vote on things. But So yeah, anyway, that's my little story about the one time I got to vote on the Grammys, and how much work and time and effort we put into it. So,
well, I mean, if you're comparing it a bit to The Office too, I can't imagine Michael Scott sits there putting much effort into, busiest beaver / bushiest beaver, and I'm pretty sure he just thinks of whatever person fits that thing and gives them the award. So.
Man, I got to go back and watch The Office again. It is for sure one of my top shows. Usually every like Christmas season, we go through and we watch all of the Christmas specials. We'll do that with the OC as well, is the other show where we'll go through and we'll watch all the Christmaka episodes. It's a good time. It's a good time.
Yeah, well, this might be the last Christmas to
Ever?
watch The Office on Netflix, at least, because it's leaving at the end of December.
Is it really?
Yeah,
That's
because
sad.
NBC is starting their own streaming service, so all those shows are going to go to there now.
See, and that's, I guess, what I used to own, I want to say the first 6 seasons of The Office on DVD.
I still have them on DVD.
Yeah, at one point I sold them because I wanted to buy some records, so I took them and chucked them. I didn't chuck them.
I'll send you
them.
a copy of mine. We'll take it back to old school Netflix. I'll mail them to you. You can mail them back.
There you go.
We'll spend a fortune mailing DVDs back and forth.
Yeah, that reminds me. I did. I signed up for Zip.ca. It was like the Canadian version of Netflix up here before Netflix was just streaming, right? So I did. I was signed up for Zip.ca, and I sent a couple back and forth at some point in time. But no, I sold all of my DVDs of The Office because I wanted to buy records, and it's been on Netflix. So that's sad, because at first I thought you were going to say, oh, it's moving over to, like Amazon Prime or something like that. And I'm like, well, I've got that as well, so I'll still be fine. But life's about to get difficult, I think.
Another $10 a month for something you don't need.
Yeah, well, totally. But anyway, whatever. Let's get into our awards. Like I said, we got 17 categories to get through. So this will either take a long time or we'll fly through it. We'll see. And we did get some submissions, if we remember to get to them, from some listeners and friends out there. So we'll see if we remember. That's the problem, is remembering to actually get to them. So why don't we get into the first award, which is the one that started this whole idea for me, as to like do this list. Best artwork. So what album did you pick for the best artwork of 2020? And I guess why?
And I'll try and kind of add some different thoughts or anecdotes or whatever. I mean, we've talked about artwork a lot on the show and just how much we love it. You still buy vinyl, and I still like buying CDs because I still like having the artwork. And to me, the art, it can kind of not necessarily make or break an album. I will not listen to a band because the art is bad, but it's definitely, like, especially when I first got into music, was a huge part of what drew me in. And so, it's still something that's really important. And so I do love when bands put effort into it. And that's one thing I really do like about, punk, hardcore, metal, that a lot of those bands still really value artwork, whereas, a lot of bigger name artists, especially now with streaming and singles, it's just kind of like a picture of them or, whatever. It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of thought put into artwork for mainstream music. And so I do appreciate that.
So you didn't pick Justin Bieber or anything?
I did. It's a 37-way tie.
Yes. Appreciate that.
I went with maybe an obvious choice, but it's Brain Pain from 4 Years Strong.
Okay. Yeah.
It's just it's a really cool art. I always love, or I'm drawn towards, images that have lots going on, like where there's a lot of different things. So whether it's album artwork or like tattoo related artwork, I like when there's kind of one main thing but a bunch of different kind of symbolism in it, and this has a whole bunch. I mean, it's pretty weird, but it fits. Yeah. It fits the title of the album, and I should have pulled it up here just so I could have talked about a few of the images, but I don't know. It's one of those pieces of art that you look at and it's like, okay, they definitely put time into this. Whoever created it, had either a specific idea or a not so specific, and so that's why there's a bunch of things. But I don't know. It's just, when I look at it, it's like there was thought behind this, and it matches what the music is.
Yeah, I enjoy it. It's not the one that I picked, but I definitely thought about it. And I will say one thing about it. When I did, because I reviewed it when it came out, and I did artwork for like the review or whatever. And so the artwork I do for everything involves Photoshop and cutting things out. And so cutting out that artwork was a pain, was a pain in the brain, was a serious
Yeah.
pain, because there's just like parts where it's like gets pretty intricate and detailed and whatever. I'm like, do I bother? Yeah, I'm gonna do it. And so but yeah, I like it. I dig that artwork too. And it's kind of psychedelic, kind of weird.
Yeah.
It definitely stands out for sure. And it's a great record too. I think yeah. My artwork that I picked for best artwork was one that I was definitely familiar with this band before this album came out, and I'd listened to them a bit. I'd never super gotten into them though. But when I saw their name come up for an album, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to pre-add this or whatever. I'm going to want to check this out. But the artwork super sold me instantly, and it came out earlier in the year. But that would be Hot Mulligan and You'll Be Fine. The artwork on this I just think is so cool, because we were talking about this as you keep disappearing on the video. What are
Yeah,
you
it's
doing,
just my battery again. Just ignore it.
man? Unless he dies. But yeah, so the artwork for this is just kind of cool because it reminds me of, in a way, like a painting that you might see kind of like in a, you know, a diner on the side of the highway type thing, where it's just this person sitting next to like a pond or a lake or whatever with their dog. But
Yeah.
but he's missing his face. So there's like his entire, I don't think he even has like hands or anything. It's just literally like, I want to say there's a hat, glasses, and then like a hoodie, and they're just sitting there, and there's nobody inside of it type thing. And it just, I don't know, I think it looks really cool. And I know for a fact that, I want to say, yeah, one of the submissions we got was on Instagram from X Bada Bing X. He said his favorite artwork of the year as well was Hot Mulligan, You'll Be Fine. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, it's definitely a looker. So, and the album ended up being really good too, because you mentioned like, I don't think that artwork can make or break a record for me, but it can definitely pique my interest if I've never heard the band.
Right. Yeah.
And like I said, with Hot Mulligan, I'd heard them, so I knew what they sounded like, but it was, you know, it definitely got me super interested right from the get-go. Can you think of, though, a record that you've bought in the past based off the artwork and it actually ended up not being good? Like, that doesn't happen so much these days because of streaming, but I can definitely think of a record in the past where I purchased it and I was like, oh, it's actually not that great when I got it home.
Yeah. Oh man, that would be. I'd have to think. And I mean, yeah, lots of the bands we like. I mean, we would still get it regardless of the art, and most of it is good. Like it's not very often that I get a record that I love and I'm like, oh, what is with this artwork?
Right.
There would be a select few, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. Or there might just be some that are like, oh, it's interesting they went with that. It doesn't. When I look at it, it doesn't really do much. I could kind of go either way on it, adding or not. So I guess it's nice when the artwork adds to it instead of just kind of being there because you kind of need to have it.
Right. I'm trying to figure out what it was called. There was
actually,
yeah.
I just thought of one. I'll touch on it when I get to it because it won in a different category.
Right. I'm just trying to see. Yeah, there was a record, I want to say it was from Piebald, that I bought based on the artwork, and I hadn't really heard them at the time. I'm just trying to, I can't remember the name of it, which is too bad, but it was like I think it was like a rarities and, you know, like B-sides. Right. Oh, is this it? Let's see. No, I don't think that's it. Anyways, it was a rarities and B-sides record, and I liked the artwork. And then I bought it, and it just wasn't very good. I mean, I didn't realize what it was. It was a lot of like demos and older stuff. And
okay, yeah.
Like, so I was a little bit disappointed. But yeah, I could tell you a record this year that had not the greatest artwork that I still liked, though, and I'd never heard the band, and I decided to check them out despite the artwork. I don't want to look in podcasts. I just want to make sure I get the name of the record right. So I'm bringing it up, but my fat fingers are pressing all the wrong buttons on my phone. The band is, or artist, I guess, is Souvenirs, and the record is called Love for the Lack of It. And it's just like, the cover really reminds me of like something you would have seen in the 80s, early 90s. It's like a chain link fence, and there's like blue skies in the background, and then just someone's hands kind of like grabbing it. And it's very
yeah.
underwhelming, the artwork, but I put it on and it's actually kind of nice, like dream pop 90s alternative sort of thing. But anyway, let's move on to the next of our series of awards. That would be the best album title. So what was your favorite album title of the year?
Yeah, again, this is one that I just kind of went with, kind of what first popped into my mind. And so, which is actually one that just came out Friday. So when you're listening to this, November 27,
Yeah.
I believe was yesterday.
Yeah.
And that's the new album from Hatebreed, which is titled Weight of the False Self. And so I was kind of like going through, when I was thinking of going through, like I went through my list of top albums of the year, and I was like, yeah, there's some cool ones in there, but I'm trying to think of something that like really stood out. And I really enjoy the Hatebreed album. The art is really cool too. And I don't know, that the title just kind of made me stop and think like, oh, I kind of wonder what that means.
Right.
And that's a big thing too. Like in lots of album titles, it's just like, brain pain. Okay.
Yeah.
I kind of have an immediate thought of,
Right.
maybe how they came up with that or whatever. Right. But
Yeah.
kind of like Weight of the False Self. Like it kind of, another one that came to mind, and maybe I'll just give it a tie for the sake of it, is Be Well's album, The Weight and the Cost. So I don't know if it was just the word weight in there, but again, just something that's like, oh, like, I don't know. It's just something different, something unique, something that kind of makes you think, makes you kind of feel something instead of just like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense if that's the title.
Well, and Be Well, I'm just trying to think, is there a track actually called The Weight and the Cost? Because I don't think there is. I could be wrong. But the reason I bring that up is because I feel, oh no, there is. Yeah, there totally is a song called The Weight and the Cost. Okay. So, I wanted to say, like, I like it when an album has a title that isn't from a song but fits the theme of the album real well. And I was going to say that is from a song, but at the same point it fits the theme of the entire album really well. So before I get into my pick, I thought I would share Justin from the Punk Lotto podcast sent in his, and he said his favorite album title was from Canadian pop punk band Pup, and the album is called This Place Sucks Ass, which is a pretty great title. I like it. My best album title of the year was from Spanish Love Songs and their record Brave Faces Everyone, because again, it is one that I think is very fitting of what that album is about. I don't know that it's a concept album or anything like that, but it is definitely a title, because obviously if it's a concept album, sure, the title is going to fit the record pretty well. This one I think just encompasses kind of what they deal with lyrically over the course of that record, and it's definitely going to help when the record is one that you enjoy. So I enjoyed this one.
Yeah.
The title, I thought it always stuck too. Like it does come from a song on the record for sure. And the way he sings the line, I think, definitely helps it stick. So let's get into, this was something we were going to list a couple of, but this would be the best EP. So what is your pick for best EP?
So my best EP is also the one that I just touched on about artwork, because based on the artwork, I would not be intrigued on this one. And that's the EP from No Pressure, also titled No Pressure. So this is, I can't remember his name, but the singer from The Story So Far. I believe that's right.
Oh, Parker Cannon. Yeah. I forgot about that. Oh, dang. I forgot about this record. It is good.
Man. This EP, it kind of came out of nowhere. I'm not even exactly sure where and when I heard of it. Maybe actually you sent it to me, or we were talking about it. Yeah, and it's just like I like the Story So Far. They're not like in my top 10, but this is exactly what I love. It just reminds me of bands like Blink and Enema of the State, and I don't know, it just has such a cool nostalgia feel to it. But it still sounds new and fresh, and it's really quick. I think it's 4 songs in like 9 minutes or something. Which is nice, because then it's like, I'm just going to keep putting it on repeat, and because it's just so good. And
did you say the artwork from this record didn't sell you on it?
No, it just looks like kind of like some like random like indie hip hop or something. It's just kind of like new school graffiti-ish, but not super. I don't know.
So my best EP of the year was actually one that I debated putting it on my top 10 list and then just decided not to, because I'm like, oh, I think you can also consider this an EP. It's 22 songs, but it's only 20 minutes. And so it's American Fail, their self-titled debut, which I mean, you can, I guess, debate, because this is my question: is when it comes to talking about EPs, are we talking, it's got to have a certain number of songs? Are we talking it's got to, you know what I mean? Like, so this obviously has a ton of songs, but it's still only 20 minutes long. And so each song is less, like averaging less than a minute. It's got some weird stuff going on, as in, obviously it feels like one song or maybe two songs kind of split up, but there's no real like chorus or refrain sort of thing, except for one line that gets repeated a couple times. But I think it is a pretty cool record. Some other good ones that came out this year, of course, Strike Anywhere had their kind of like return with their EP. And then we had Fever 333. They put out a really good EP as well. There were a ton of EPs really this year.
Willamette, Guardrail.
Yeah,
Thief
Goalkeeper
Club.
was a band, another one that I considered up at the top of this list. They put out a great one. And going back to artwork, I really appreciated how with the singles that they released ahead of time, it was all different artwork, but it was all clearly like kind of themed and branded the same way that it was working towards the artwork for the EP. Is really neat. So let's get into the best live stream of the year. What was your favorite?
Well, yeah, like we had texted, I only really technically watched two of them. And even just in the last few weeks, I think there's been like probably almost 10 that I've seen announced, that are coming up this month or in the coming months. And so I definitely think this is going to be, kind of the new thing. And I don't know kind of yet how many of those kind of all watch or whatever, but cool bands are doing that. So yeah, the one I went with was from August Burns Red. So I watched that one and the MXPX one, both very different, both really cool in their own way. I went with the August Burns Red one because they were playing their favorite album of mine, which is their first full length from start to finish. And so that was awesome to get to see that. They brought their original singer back for a song, and just the production was really good. And it was really clear, and the sound was awesome, and the lights, and it was just a really, really fun watch.
Yeah. I didn't see it. You mentioned the MXPX one, which, going back to some submissions we got, Jay Morello, X Bada Bing X, he actually said MXPX was his favorite. He said, "Is that a real question?"
Yeah, I know. I mean, it was really cool to see them and some of the songs they played, and
it was really good. It wasn't my favorite either, because I went with the Wonder Years and their Halloween show that they did. And that was just a ton of fun because obviously they played a set of songs as the Wonder Years, but then before that they played two like 5-song sets. They split so they're a 6-person band and they split into 2 3-pieces and they played 2 separate Blink 182 cover sets. And it was just like,
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was so much fun. It was a good time.
Did they cover like the hits on that or what? What kind of songs did they play?
Let's see if I can remember. I know, on their encore as a 6-piece, they played Damn It, which was so entertaining too, because right before it, Dan Campbell said, neither one of the bands played this because they wanted to make sure they all played different songs and they couldn't decide which band could play that song because all the guitar players wanted to play it, right? Like they have 3 guitar players in the band. So they ended up doing this thing where they all played a different part of the riff. So it was so awesome. Like, on the intro, they all played a different piece of the riff, and then they came together, and it was so fantastic. What did they play? They played All the Small Things. I think they played What's My Age Again. They played First Date, I think. They played Aliens Exist. It was mainly, most of the songs I want to say were off of like Dude Ranch, Enema of the State, and Take Off Your Pants and Jacket. I think they kind of they may have had 1 or 2 outside of that, but I don't really remember. It was cool. It was a really good stream. So let's move. This one I had to do some thinking, but Mest music video. What's the best music video of the year?
You trying to tell me it should be Mest?
Yeah.
Because it's not. Not. This was a really hard one because I was like, well, man, in a year, like how many music videos come out? Like how would I even go back and think of them all? And so I just kind of was going through my list of kind of favorite albums from the year, not just the top 10, but all of them. And this is one that probably would have made like the top 15. And so the song is called Aftermath. And it's the music video on the Ghost Inside's newest album. So they're a band that, which we've mentioned them a few times.
Yeah.
I think with songs, and so they went through this, this huge traumatic accident as a band, and there was all this stuff that happened. So they're back this year with a new album, and so this was the first song that they released. It's actually the last song on the album. So that's kind of interesting to release the last song as the first one. But it's just a really powerful video. It's got lots of clips of the guys like going through rehab and kind of reconnecting and starting to play instruments and stuff post accident recovery. And I don't know, I wouldn't say many songs, especially in this genre, like really make me emotional. But this was one that was like, oh man, like it's pretty intense as you watch it. And I mean, the song is awesome as well, and the video is really well done. And so as soon as I remembered this one, I was like, okay, this is one that really stands out from the year.
Yeah. It's so hard to think back on all the different music videos. Because what was the one you just sent one recently, I think, where they like start the beginning of the video is them. I can't remember the band, but they're playing, and then the guy like breaks his leg.
Oh, Landmarks.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. And then then they start the video again, and he's in the wheelchair the whole time. That was pretty awesome. I really liked the video for, I think it's Still Blue by Seaway, which is just kind of weird and trippy. The one I went with, though, is maybe the simplest of all of them. And it's the song Unbreakable by American Arson. I'm a sucker for music videos, and I said this when interviewing them, music videos where it's just the band in their jam space going at it, right? And the thing I like about that video too is there's kind of like Easter egg sort of things, kind of throughout their jam space. They're all typically like Detroit sports stuff. Were the ones that I was picking up on. It was just kind of neat. And then they've got some show posters in the back. I don't know. It was just kind of fun to watch it. It's a great song. And then to watch the video, because you can almost like do it in phases. Like the first time I watched it, I was like, oh, this is a great song. And the second time I watched it, I was probably paying more attention to their performance. And then the third time, I'm like, what's all in the background? So there's just like different things to sort of see. And it's a bit of a fun video. So I
did think of that one as well.
Yeah, it's a great one. So let's move on to the biggest surprise of the year. Now you can really take this any way you want. It could be a band that, you'd never heard of, and they put out a record that you really loved. It could be a band that you disliked all their previous stuff, and they put out something you loved. It could even be a band that you love, and you just kind of went like, oh, I didn't expect them to go that direction, or, oh, that wasn't really as good as I thought it would be. Just whatever surprised you this year.
Yeah. And again, I went with just what came to mind because of talking with our top 10, and that was Seaway's Big Vibe. So I had mentioned on that episode that it's not that I'm not a fan of the band, but I just never particularly really go listen to them. They're not my favorite, in that genre or for what it is. But this album, like I mentioned, the top 10, just, it's got a bit different feel to it. And I don't know, just doesn't seem as corny to me as some of their last stuff. And it's just super catchy, great songs. And I always love, like, anytime I'm listening to a record where it's, I don't really have any preconceived thoughts. Like, I don't think I listen to any of the singles. Mm-hmm. And so in my mind, it's like, what if this just like blows me away? What if it's just something that I totally, maybe 1 out of 10 that happens. Yeah. And so this was one of those where I put it on just like the first song. I was like, okay, I think I'm like really going to like this. And I'm really excited to hear more. And I love when music does that. And so it's, always a nice surprise. And so, good job, Seaway. Sorry to slam you, but
that's a good one. My biggest surprise of the year was a band I've already mentioned. Before I get it, I'll say I was surprised by Neck Deep. All Distortions Are Intentional, because I'm not a big Neck Deep fan, and to be honest, like the first single for sure didn't really click with me. Where it is in the album, I like it a lot more now, but so like that record did actually surprise me. But the one I went with that was a bigger surprise was a band that I'd never heard of because it's their first record. That's American Fail. The first time I put it on, I hit play, and it took me a few minutes. All of a sudden, I'm like, what song am I on? And I look, and I'm, 5-6 tracks in. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? So I go back to the beginning and listen, because they're all kind of like I mentioned before, put together as, one, maybe two songs, however you want to break it up. It's really neat. And lyrically, it stands out because they got a lot to say, and they definitely don't mince words. And the fact that it's on drums, it's Yuri from MXPX, which is mind-boggling to me. That so it's really cool. It's a great little EP. Let me look. Let's see. Gonna go back to Jay Morello. He said the new Suicide Machines kind of caught me out of nowhere and surprisingly felt like they never left, which that's fair. It's I wasn't a big fan of the record. I just felt kind of beat over the head repeatedly. Lyrically, it kind of got a little tiring for me, but I mean, I definitely get that it feels like they never went away. Like they didn't miss a beat. So that's pretty cool. Let's move on to best feature. This is interesting because I mean, when I presented this to you, I said best feature as in vocal guest appearance, music, like an instrumental, like playing guitar or something, guest appearance. One of the submissions we got went a completely different direction. So I did want to mention it, and that one is coming from, again, Justin over at the Punk Lotto podcast. He said best feature, the summer bundle of Oceanator's Things I Never Said. It came with pogs and temporary tattoos. So that's kind of cool that he went that way with like, oh, it was something that was featured at a purchase. And that sounds pretty rad. But let's go with what your favorite feature was this year on a record.
Yeah. Well, again, there was, I feel like there was quite a few good features this year. I don't know if it's just because bands are sitting around more, and so it's like, this guy's probably available to play on an album or whatever. Like even thinking of
you're not doing
Yuri
anything
from MXPX or whatever.
Right.
But I ended up going with a Silverstein song called "Burn It Down." It has Caleb Shomo from Beartooth. I love Caleb. I love his vocals. I like his singing and screaming, and it adds such a cool build up on this. So he kind of starts kind of more kind of sing talking and then screams it. I don't know. It just added a lot to the song. It's a really cool song. And so that's the one that stuck out for me.
My favorite feature of the year is Chris Carrabba of Dashboard Confessional in the latest Matt Cutshall Emo's Not Dead video. That's not my actual pick, but have you watched any of those videos? I think I said
yeah.
Yeah.
It's like
it's amazing because like
or whatever.
Yeah, Felt Emo Might Delete is the title of every video basically. Those videos are I laugh so hard at them. But anyways, they're getting ridiculous and fantastic. One that's worth mentioning, at least, it wasn't my pick, but the song Breathe by Knuckle Puck featuring Derek Sanders of Mayday Parade is a really good one. The best feature that I went with is probably the highlight on the album it comes off of, and that's Touche Amore. Their album is Lament. The song is Limelight, and it features Andy Hull of Manchester. It actually says featuring Manchester Orchestra, so I'm not sure if more members of the band are on there in some way, shape, or form, or doing like a kind of gang backup vocal, but Andy Hull has like a straight up feature on that song as well, where he comes in and sings. And just I guess the shift in Jeremy Boehm's vocals from Touche Amore to Andy Hull's, they're so different, but they work quite well together on the song, and it definitely gives it, kind of a shift in the song, and it's really awesome. So if you haven't heard that one, I'd say go check it out. So let's move on to, I was debating whether or not we move this to the end because it kind of feels like a big award, but we're just going to do it. That would be the best song of the year. What was your favorite song of 2020?
Yeah, I just want to quickly touch on that last one, how I really do like on a feature, especially vocally, when it is something that's super different. So I mean, Caleb's not that different from Shane from Silverstein. They both sing and scream. He's got a distinct voice, but I definitely do love where a vocal comes in and it's like, oh wow, like either that sounds weird but good, or you just really know that it's a different singer. So I always like that. Best song, this is probably the hardest one because I think I've said before on the podcast where I'm kind of a full album person. I don't really have necessarily favorite songs on albums. However, every time I've listened to this one, I always just think this is just a really good song. And it actually comes off of the deluxe version of "The World Is in Your Way" by Dragged Under that came out mid-November, and it's one of the bonus songs on it is called "Feel It," and it's definitely on the poppier side of Dragged Under. But I don't know. Every time I listen, I just feel like it's just such a well-written song. It's super catchy. I don't know. There's just lots of different parts to it that it's like, oh, like that was such a cool idea there, and it just really adds a lot to the song.
Yeah. It's funny when that happens with like a song that was originally left off the album. I'm assuming like if their deluxe version, I don't know if they were songs that they originally cut from the album or if they were just a couple that they had written in between and were like, well, we need to put this out, but instead of a full album, let's just tack it onto this.
Yeah, it was actually a new song. So they wrote 2 new songs and then a Christmas one. So it's kind of weird to say best song of the year because, I mean, it's only really been out for, well, not even a month at this point.
Yeah.
Well, actually, no, they released it before the album came out. So it's been out for about a month.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's just one of those that really, I mean, there's lots of great songs, like I said, but this is one that it's like, man, like I could just tell that they put effort into it. Plus when you're adding a few new songs, and for a band like them, I mean, they put out their album 2 months later, COVID hits, they didn't really get to tour. And so they re-released an album to kind of get it out there and then to also add new songs to keep people intrigued. Like you really want to put effort in instead of just like, oh, let's throw in some B-sides just because, so there was lots of things that went into why I thought this was a great song and a good idea.
Yeah. My pick for best song of the year is 4 Year Strong's 17. And this song, the moment I heard it, I was like, oh, I need to listen to that again. And it's one that, because I'm in a very similar way, like I don't typically just put a song on, like I'll just put an album on and let it start at the beginning and play through, right? Whereas this one would be one where at times I'd be like, I really want to listen to that song. And it's all based around the guitar riff that plays in the chorus. That's just so, it's unique. It's very different. I feel like as something that's featured in a chorus, I don't know, it just stands out. And it's been, like I said, a song from, kind of the moment I heard it was, it was one of my favorites. Jay Morello said, got to go with Slick Shoes Whispers. It was just so long awaited and just hit me at the right time. Everything about it was perfect. And then why don't we go back here to Justin from the Punk Lotto podcast. Just going to figure, John K. Sampson's Fantasy Baseball at the End of the World. Classic.
Nice.
Great song. So let us move on to the next song, which would be best cover song.
Yeah, well, and just to touch on, I almost did pick 17 too. That was one of the ones that popped into my head.
That would have been funny.
Same thought. So
such a good song.
Yeah, I was trying, and so I do say that, it's kind of the first thing I thought of, but there were some where it's like, maybe I should keep thinking because I already had them as winners for lots of things, and so I was trying to.
Yeah, and that's the one thing. And it's funny because, like, as a bit of a spoiler, if you haven't listened to our top 10, I already gave you warning to listen to it. 4 Year Strong's Brain Pain finished very high in both of our lists, but I don't think I have a pick from my number one pick for any of these. So it's kind of funny because 4 Year Strong has come up a couple times now on this episode between the two of us. But let's move on to best cover song.
Yeah, I went with Scott Sellers, who released an awesome album. So I picked MXPX's Your Problem, My Emergency. It's one of my favorite albums off of Life in general. I love what he adds to it. And again, there's always lots of cover songs that get released in a year, like either for mainstream artists or groups that, specifically do cover songs. And so I was trying to think of what's something that means more to me than just, that was a cool version of the cover. Yeah. So not only is this a cool version, but the actual song means a lot to me. So that was a pretty easy one to pick.
And I figured between any of the submissions and us that Scott Sellers, that record would come up somewhere. So I probably could have picked something off there, but I actually went with one that was kind of neat. So it's Millington, the band is Millington, and they covered Dashboard Confessional's Vindicated. And this was fun. So Millington is like a ska punk band. So definitely putting a twist on, on an emo pop song of Dashboard Confessionals. And it was funny because I tweeted about it. I forget where I tweeted it. If I just straight up sent a tweet or if it was, I commented on, but anyways, tagged Dashboard Confessional. And so he retweeted it and whatever. And I was like, look at this. This is awesome. And so Millington was pretty pumped kind of about that sort of connection happening. And I was like, that's fun. But Yeah, it came off of I believe he called the EP Brass Emo Volume 1. So it's like ska covers of a bunch of different emo songs. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, I'm just gonna pop back over to some of our submissions. I'm curious what some of the other best cover songs was. Justin
I think
over at
Jay Morello also had Scott Sellers.
I think so. Justin over at Punk Lotto
the Bigwig
Podcast.
song.
Yeah, said Late Bloomer Start Today. And then best cover song, Jay Morello said Scott Sellers' Best of Me by Bigwig. Yeah, that whole album's just insane, but to my recollection, I've never heard a Bigwig cover of one of my favorite albums. So that's kind of cool. So let's move on to our next award, which would be the best opening track. What do you got?
Oh man, yeah, this is a tough one because again, like I've said lots, I love an opening track. It's still, even with streaming, even with all that, the opening track is what I'm always kind of excited just to see if it's going to catch my attention. I think I mentioned with the Slick Shoes album and their opening track on there that with Whispers, which also got mentioned in this episode. Yeah, so I went with this was number 5 on my top list. So giving away another spoiler. That was on Lightworkers' album Fury by Failure. The song is called Empire, and it's just a monster of an opening song. It's just super like heavy and melodic, and I don't know. It's just one of those that every time I put it on, it's like, oh man, I can't wait to listen to the rest of this album.
Yeah. Best opener that I went with is coming off an album that's been all over our list. It's 4 Years Strong, and the song It's Cool. I can't think of like an opening song this year that just like, I guess, sucked me in so much right away. Because there've been a lot of great albums this year, but I can't, like, off the top of my head of the picks that I made, like any albums that are just like, oh, that opener is doing something. Whereas this one 100% is. It's so good. I talked about it briefly in our top 10 episode because it was the song that I kind of picked. And, it's just like, it's different from the rest of the record, but fits so nice. It works really well. So I
almost picked that one too.
There you go. Let's get into best closing track.
Yeah, so this was an interesting one too. And like you mentioned, I wasn't going to go listen to the last song. And like lots of times, last songs kind of get forgotten. Even if you listen to the whole album, your brain's already taken in a whole album's worth of songs. And so, sometimes it just kind of glazes over that. But this is one that every time I listen to the album on the closing track, I always go look at the list. Or the first few times it's like, oh, like where is this in the track listing? It's like, oh, this is the closer. And it's another metal band called Bury Tomorrow. The song is called Dark Infinite. And it's just got this really cool breakdown in it that kind of carries the song through. And just something about it just always grabs me and just kind of keeps me intrigued. And it's just this kind of really dark, haunting sound. And I don't know, I love it.
Yeah. The closing track that I went with was The Casket Lottery, the song Sad Dream. I love a closing song that has kind of like a longer instrumental section, especially if that's not the case on songs throughout the rest of the record. And so this one has it, especially if it's like an instrumental section that kind of feels like it's bringing things to a close. It doesn't necessarily have to end with that, but like it's part of this long, this long drawn out song or whatever. And so Sad Dream does that. It also makes me want to immediately turn around and put it on. This is a record. That Short Songs for End Times that I don't actually like the opener as an opener. And when I wrote my review for it, I kind of like said that like the only bone to pick I really have with this record is the song that opens it up. So the fact that I can like go through the album, listen to the closer, and then go back and still be okay listening to that opener is, I think, kind of a testament to how good I think the closer is. But I just want to hop over and see what are some other closing tracks. Jay Morello said Frank Turner, Falling in Love by No Effects. So that was off the
Split EP they did or something.
Yeah. Once I heard Fat Mike talk about in an interview about how that's exactly how he meant to write that song, but just couldn't do it. And how him and his ex-wife cried after hearing it, just made it so perfect. That's kind of cool. I went through that split. It was I liked it. I'm trying to think of the name of it, but anyway, I love Frank Turner. Frank Turner is pretty pretty fantastic. Let's get into best throwback. So with this kind of, when I brought it up, I mean, it's another kind of open-ended one, but we do, I was going to say you could do it as like a band that's back sort of thing, but we do have a category specifically for that. So I was thinking more about, like just different influences that are definite throwbacks. So what's your best throwback of the year?
Well, this is one I mentioned already, and maybe an obvious choice, which is Scott Sellers' album Influences. I mean, yeah, I kind of went through all the albums from the year trying to see if any of those, like, there was a few that I could have fit in there too, but this was just such an obvious one. So many songs from that era. I guess maybe not necessarily the 80s, it would be more so 90s. But what I loved about this album is that, like, he had released a few of these covers, like maybe even a year ago or so, just kind of one-offs. And then he started kind of releasing them a bit more, like once a week you'd see a new one. Yeah. I remember thinking like, oh man, like, why doesn't this guy just do a whole album of covers already instead of just posting? And then it was like the week later he released the whole album, which just made my day. And I love every song on there, all the bands. And this was an easy winner. There was a few others that I was like, I've listened to some songs from this and that, but I mean, I've listened to this album, I don't know, probably a dozen times already, so it had to take the win.
There you go. My best throwback, I went with something that was more of a sound, and that was Bearings and the song I Feel It All. It's very like 90s pop rock sort of thing, especially on the chorus. Like, you just hear it hit, and I had to go with it. But so let's move on to best release from a longtime band. So bands that, I mean, I guess could still be going, or bands that were, kind of on hiatus or whatever for a while and stormed back with a great record. Yeah,
well, you can probably guess which mine is, which is Rotation Frequency from Slick Shoes. It was just a no-brainer for that. I mean, there's been a lot of bands that have been around for a long time that have released albums this year, but I mean, there was just so much anticipation for this. It fits into so many categories, and so again, was just an easy pick for me.
I mean, in a similar way, I didn't pick Slick Shoes, but I mean, it was kind of, we had to go in a sense by our lists, because both of these records that one made both of our lists, and then this one finished higher on my list. So it's the Casket Lottery, Short Songs for End Times. I was not, I mean, when they announced it and I heard the first single, I was like, all right, I don't think the Casket Lottery are a band that necessarily hits you straight up with a song that's just like, oh, dang, this is really good and catchy. It's more of, they've always been, at least for me, they've always been a band that's just like, you kind of grow over time. And, as you're listening, the record kind of gets better and better. And that's definitely the case for me with anything I've ever owned and really gotten into by them. And Short Songs for End Times is right up there with it. How about this? This might be in a different spot on your list because I threw it on here kind of last minute, but your favorite non-punk album.
Yeah, this was, I mean, kind of funny because I probably check out, a decent amount of non-punk albums. I was chatting with a friend the other day and he mentioned one, and I'm blanking on the title of it. It's just kind of a one guy. And he sent it and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And there was a handful of albums like that, but to me, like, oh yeah, this is pretty cool. It isn't really favorite, because I'm not going to listen to it from start to finish. And so, what I went with was Let Me Roar from Northcote. Again, maybe an obvious choice. We mentioned a few times, it's one that I've listened to, at least a handful of times from start to finish and always love it. And it's funny because I still kind of associate that like within the punk genre, even though it's not, maybe just because of Matt and his past or whatever. But so then like I sent that text and I was like, oh yeah, I guess Northcote would be it. So, well,
and anytime I've seen him, he's been touring with bands that also have that connection to the punk world. Right. So I think it's fair. But at the same point, it's definitely not a punk record. Right. So, and mine,
very slow punk record.
Yeah. My favorite non-punk album is one that I also think kind of like it gets a lot of attention within, kind of somewhat, maybe more like the emo world than the punk world, but also a lot of attention outside. It was Phoebe Bridgers and her album Punisher. I just love, I mean, Phoebe Bridgers is an artist for me that if I just want to like mellow out and chill out, I'll put her on, and every time it's just like there's so much to kind of take in that's really, really nice to listen to. And I can already tell you that we do this again next year, and my favorite album is probably going to be not Phoebe Bridgers. She doesn't have another one coming out, but Julian Baker, she's got a new record coming out, who they obviously played together in Boy Genius and stuff. And I feel like they're just like go-tos for me if I just want to kind of, like I said, mellow out. So I put that one there because now we're going to jump into podcast territory. And so I wanted to hear your favorite music podcast.
Oh, this was probably one of the hardest categories to pick. I do listen to a lot of podcasts, and I mean, especially this year, we've connected with a lot of other ones and made friends, and guested on or had them on or whatever, so. But I wanted to pick one where it wasn't just based on like friendship, but one that I actually have listened to a lot. And I mean, lots of them I listen to, all of them. I mean, like a podcast like Label that I think Jay Morello mentions, I mean, is a favorite, but there's enough on those ones where, I mean, I listen to every episode, but there's definitely ones where I'm not like as a big fan of the band. I like the podcast, so I listen, but so what I went with was the Talking Records podcast. So these are our friend Jed and I'm blanking on the other guy's name, Craig. Is that the other guy that he does it with? I mean, he has lots of guests on and stuff, but I really like the guys on there. They're just like really soft spoken, and they're big music fans, and it comes out in the way that they do interviews and talk about albums. They cover a lot of bands and albums that I'm really interested in, and I don't know. I really enjoy listening to them talk, and it's been cool to connect with them more this year as well.
Yeah. It's funny because I don't listen to a ton of podcasts. Like I kind of like go in and out here and there. I more see like episodes that maybe catch my eye, or podcast ideas that catch my eye. So like some that, I kind of enjoyed this year. Like a big one is always like the Washed Up Emo podcast, but they're kind of like, they've been around. They get, a ton of great guests. So that's sort of what I look at. Or even like the One Life, One Chance podcast with Toby Morse. Like he gets a ton of great.
That was another one I thought of.
And again, you mentioned, like kind of like Friends and whatever, like Jimmy Eat Pod. They're a fun one to listen to when I'm just like wanting to put something on. One that kind of surprised me, mainly because I'm not really a big fan of the band. Like I enjoy the band, but I've only ever really listened to one record and owned one record of theirs, but have kind of jumped in a little bit with like a song by song podcast. Would be Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. And so like most of the time, they'll be like, okay, this song is what we're talking about. I'm like, I got to go listen to it because I have no idea what it sounds like. Right. So that's kind of fun, but it's been a good one that I've kind of really dug into. Probably the most out of podcasts this year would be that one.
I haven't actually got to that one yet. I added that one. I think I actually sent that one to you.
Maybe I remember seeing.
I
would say I do remember seeing their Twitter account come up and followed them on Twitter with like before, and then finally I was like, I should probably listen to this. And so it's a lot of fun. But I think because like Propaganda is like a band that there's so much lyrical depth with a lot of their stuff that's fun to listen to them sort of break that down, right? So, and considering they're a Canadian band and wrote a lot about Canadian issues, it's kind of fun to listen to a couple of Americans try to break some of that down. But it is it's a good time.
I definitely do want to get to it.
So what about your favorite music podcast episode?
Again, man.
The one when the time you were on talking.
The most I've had to rack my that's the one then where I got to hear myself sound like an idiot. No, this is one. Again, there was lots, and I even have some in my downloaded queue right now that could have made it. However, I didn't actually get to listen to them yet. So there was one like there's a new episode with Trevor Keith on the One Life, One Chance podcast.
Oh yeah,
and I was like, oh, that's going to be a good one. I read the description, and but I just haven't even gotten to listening to it yet. So I went with another podcast I really enjoy, which is Krista Makes, who plays in Less Than Jake.
Yeah.
He started a podcast this year where he talks to people about a specific song, typically their breakout or a hit song kind of thing. And he's had lots of really cool guests on there. But the one I went with was Mark Hoppus talking about What's My Age Again. it was just a really interesting listen. Lots of funny stories and anecdotes, and I
Yeah.
mean that one was especially good because I mean it's a song I've been listening to for 20 whatever however many years since 96 or whenever that album came out, or
Yeah.
99, right? I think. And with the state came out 99.
Yeah, 96.
Yeah.
Wow.
So 21 years I've been listening to this song, and I mean it's not necessarily a song that has a lot of lyrical depth or anything,
Right.
but it's always cool just hearing the stories of like, you know, was this just like a random like joke riff, or was it going to be a throwaway song, or, you know, there's always so many things. And on this episode, or not on this episode, on this podcast, there are a lot of songs where it's like, this was basically almost didn't make the record, and then it turns out to be this hit song that does so much for the band. And so I mean this was one of those songs for sure.
Yeah, I've only listened to one episode of that show, and I'm trying to think if it was that one. I think it may have been, because as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh yeah. But I'm pretty sure I've only listened to one episode of the Krista Makes podcast, but I like the idea of it. Again, I don't listen to a ton of podcasts. So like it's funny because like as hosting a podcast, I feel like my input on picking like favorite podcasts is pretty like limited because I don't do a ton. But my favorite music podcast episode, another one I wanted to mention, Unscripted Moments, they had Sami Zayn on and interviewed him, and Sami Zayn is a professional wrestler. I'm a fan of wrestling, and specifically I've always enjoyed Sami Zayn because I know like that he grew up and still listens to punk rock and a lot of ska sort of stuff, and he does a lot of great like just like social justice sort of work. And so I was pumped to hear that interview. It was a fun listen. But I think the episode I'm going to go with is an episode of the One Life, One Chance podcast. And it's when Toby Morse interviews Chino Moreno of Deftones. No, that episode, I tried listening to that episode, but he's Chino's chewing gum the whole time. And
so beautiful.
It's like smacks into the microphone. I was like, it was so annoying. But no, from the One Life, One Chance podcast, Toby's interview with Chris Carrabba of Dashboard Confessional. I think it was
I was going to guess that one.
Yeah, a two-parter.
It was. Yeah. I listened to that one this summer.
I do really enjoy. I've listened to a number of interviews with Chris. I just always feel like he's just got a ton to say, and it's always kind of surprising, like because he's like, I guess, you know, the music he makes, knowing like I just love hearing him talk about, you know, like growing up and coming through the hardcore scene when he's like this guy who got huge, you know, with a song on the Spider-Man 2 soundtrack that's, you know, was all over. It's just kind of fun to hear that. But so yeah, it was a good interview. What about, this is the final category we're going to get into, and this is where we pat ourselves on the back a little bit, or we just say this was the most fun we had. What was your favorite interview this year that you got to do?
Do you have a guess?
You did so many. You could probably guess mine, but I'm going to say when you interviewed Jackson and Jeremiah of Slick Shoes.
Yeah, you know me too well. And huge shout out to all the awesome people I've been able to talk to this year. It's been so much fun. I'm looking forward to another year of it. And so again, was a difficult one, but the reason I picked that is it's kind of, you know, a three-way tie / however many episodes we did with them or reviews.
All the
it was just so fun. Yeah, right. So I had them. I did one with Joe. Did one with Steve Kravac.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so fun getting to dive into like one of my all-time favorite bands. Yeah, and getting to hear from them, and just so much kind of 16-year-old geeky me getting to, you know, have the opportunity to think of whatever I wanted to ask them. You know, go through their albums. You know, talk with Joe about drums. Talk with Steve about producing. It just covered so much ground of questions I've had for so long. And so it was just, you know, like a dream come true just to get to spend time with those guys and ask them whatever.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just like how many years literally that was in the making, I feel, or at least a year. When I feel like we had been back and forth with them forever about doing that interview. But yeah, can you guess what my favorite interview that I did this year was?
Trying to.
I did way less.
Should have gone through them all. Yeah, I might need a hint. All I can think of is the last one you did with Mike.
With
Um,
Mike Henneberger. I was like, Mike, who's Mike?
Yeah.
Those were fun too. I'll give you, because I did
Yeah.
interview 2 different authors, and it was neither of them. Those were fun though.
Okay.
Went down rabbit holes, but I interviewed a guy who put out one of my favorite records this year. He also
Was it Jason from Unoriginal Vinyl?
no, he also had a hand in creating some of the all-time great records.
Oh, Brian McTurnan.
Yeah, Brian McTurnan. That was
Yeah. Oh,
it was,
man,
and
yes.
it was so
I
much
would
fun
guess I had to
because
remember.
because like when that interview happened, I was also in the middle of reading some books that were discussing a lot of what happened in the DC hardcore scene in the 80s and whatever, which he came out of. So that was cool. And then, as I mentioned, he put out a record this year that I absolutely loved. So that was cool to talk about that. Plus,
Yeah.
worked on so many records, some of which have been some of my favorites over the years. So that was cool to talk about those too. So it was just like this sort of all encompassing, and it came out of nowhere. Like, it was literally, I posted about the Be Well record and how much I was enjoying it. And then someone commented on it saying like, oh, because then I think like Be Well commented, said, oh, thanks or whatever. And then one of our followers commented, said, get him on the show. And then it just turned into this thing where next thing you know, I was like, yeah, okay. It's like, all right. And here we go. And it was funny because as a band, Be Well, I mean, I was unfamiliar with them and didn't look into who the members were. And then when I did, I was like, oh, shoot, like this interview's got a lot of stuff we could talk about. This could be fun. So it was a ton.
That was a really interesting one.
Yeah. But yeah, that'll wrap up the first ever Guppies, which I think is a great way to wrap up what was, like I said, 2020 was a crazy year in a number of ways, but it was a ton of fun on the podcast. All sorts of, as we mentioned, great interviews, great music that we got to talk about, made a bunch of great friends. So if in any way you helped put together one of these episodes, whether, you released an album that we talked about, whether you were on any of the episodes, you were in an interview, or you just shared it, talked about it, joined us on Instagram and Twitter and all that kind of stuff, and were our friends. Thank you for a fantastic year. And speaking of Instagram and Twitter, go follow us at Growing Punk Pod. You can find us on our website too, growingpunkpod.com. You'll find the episodes there. We've got reviews that we do there as well. Lists, just different things. It's some of the stuff doesn't get talked about on the podcast, but it's on the website. So growingpunkpod.com. And yeah, wherever you're listening to this, rate it, review it, please share it with your friends. Let's make 2021 an even better year. This was a good one. Let's keep it going. So anything you want to add before we wrap up 2020, Aaron?
If you were mentioned in this, email our management for your prize.
Yeah.
Which is you.
You are the prize. So anyways, that will do it for this one. So again, thanks again, and goodbye.
Yeah.
The busiest Beaver Award goes to Phyllis Lappin. Yeah! Way to go, Phyllis. Nice work. Per usual.
It says bushiest beaver.